Wednesday night football game. Georgia State taking on App State here to get things rolling. We've got App State 10.5 point home favorites here. 60 the total in this game. Obviously, App State, we see coming into this year, this was a team that was expected to be one of the best teams in the Sun Belt, but they have had some hiccups this year. There's no question about that. They lose, obviously, the first week against North Carolina. They had a tough loss there. They gave up 63. They lost 63-61. They had a loss to James Madison, who we're finding out is a pretty good football team this year, 32-28. They had a big lead in that game and let it get away. And then the game prior to their bye against Texas State, 19-point favorites. And they end up losing 36-24. It was a rough game for this suddenly struggling defense for App State. And really, when you look at their schedule, they had the upset win against A&M, which is a nice win, but A&M's kind of been disappointing this year. And then they followed that up with, barely surviving Troy with a Hail Mary to win. And they beat the Citadel 49-0. And that's really all there is to it with what they've done. Georgia State got off to a terrible start. They lost their first 3 games, including a loss to Charlotte, as 20-point favorites. And the moment that happened, and then they lost to Coastal Carolina after that. So they started the season 0-4, lost to South Carolina as well, but they bounced back 2 straight wins and covers against Army and Georgia Southern. The defense is still a little bit shaky, but the offense has certainly sprung to life and played a lot better. 72 points in the last 2 games for this Georgia State offense. The quarterback, Darren Granger, I should say, he's been very, very solid for them. A little bit better passing, but more than anything, using his legs, relying on Jamius Williams running the football. Jamari Thrash has been good lately in the receiving game as well, in the passing attack for Georgia State. So they've definitely started to get things going. And sometimes when you have that real bad loss like they had against Charlotte and you're able to rebound from it, a lot of times you're undervalued because they drop the power rating when you suffer that kind of brutal loss against Charlotte. And since then, I think Georgia State's been a little bit undervalued. So I'm actually looking at the 10.5 here and taking the points with Georgia State in this game. I think they can hang tough here with an App State team that we know at Boone, North Carolina, and that home field, they can be pretty tough, especially on a weeknight standalone game like this. But I'm telling you what, I think Georgia State's starting to turn a corner after a rough start, starting to play a little bit better. I'm leaning Panthers here early in the week. What do you say, Conor? Georgia State, App State.
Yeah, I agree with you. When they came out 0-4, whatever you said, I knew they were a better football team than that number, and they were going to win some games here. You mentioned Granger just needs to be okay, but the big thing for Georgia State, which I think they'll have some success against App State, is on the ground. Over almost 240 a game, 13th in the country. That got him those games against Army. You mentioned Georgia Southern. Both defenses are very good, and that is Georgia State's problem. But I think this is too many. If you're on the other side, you like App State, you just got to – they haven't been good the last few, but you got to bank on Bryce, Peoples, the whole thing the last few years, them being at home. But if it's over 10, I got to lean the points as well. I think this is a little bit too big in this one. So I grab the points with Georgia State.